It's Thursday, May 2nd. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. And it is truly a hell of a day to talk ball because joining me is a man I've been excited to talk to all draft season. I feel like we actually have not gone back and forth much at all, not on air, really barely off air, but it's one of my favorite people in the industry, one of my favorite guys to talk to about prospects. It is the author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, Mr. Matt Waldman. Waldman, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. It's always good to be able to talk with my bud, Matt Harmon. So, look, man, it's nice that we get to catch up and do this. And, because the only other person I get to watch film with these days is this little box safety to my right here in the background. So,
yeah, you're officially a dog guy. I mean, I think that's new since the last time we've done a show together, I think.
It is, yes. A friend of mine found him at the side of the road in Southeast Georgia, like on three legs, shot, whipped, had been on his own for about 6 weeks. And she called me up and said, I found your dog. And I said, I haven't had a dog in 30 years. I've only had cats. And she's like, this is your dog. And she was right. He even has Cleveland Browns colors. So he's the next Cleveland Browns box safety. He's going to try. If you see all the sorts of debris in the background, those are Najee Harris drills that we're doing right now.
I mean, incredible stuff. Well, hey, shout out to you. You're my friend. You're a good guy. I already knew that, but extra shout out to you for being a good guy and rescuing a dog in need. As a fellow rescue dog owner, not Charlie. I mean, didn't rescue him.
That dog's pampered from the get-go.
He didn't rescue him from anything except maybe made his life probably easier than it was in his previous.
Will you please
home.
change the pillow? It's not fluffed enough for me. Yeah.
Yeah, hilarious because you can't see him, but he's literally on top of like a pile of pillows over there. But my other dog, Peach, yeah, very similar background, and it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. Again, shout out to you for doing that. This is going to be a very rewarding show here, Waldman, for the listeners because we do this every year on the show. I really wanted to have you on this one because I just want to talk through some players with you in like a wide variety. And the best way to do that is to just do a Dynasty rookie mock draft. We're going to go pick by pick. We're going to try to do 3 rounds, so 36 picks in total. I decided we should do a Superflex because, number one, the Superflex bros always are like, if you're not doing a Superflex Dynasty draft, like, are you even really trying? And number two, I really want to hear your take on some of these quarterbacks. So, going to be super exciting here. Let's get right into it because, again, we got a lot of picks here to make. And because I am such a gracious, lovely guy, I decided to give you the first pick. So, with the 101 in our little Superflex Dynasty rookie mock draft here, Matt Waldman, who is your first pick?
Well, I'm getting set up, so I'm going to go ahead and take Caleb Williams, number 1, just because really, to me, even whether it's Superflex or not, I want quarterbacks who I feel like can anchor my team for the next 10 to 12 years. Now, if most of you who do listen to me on a regular basis know I'm very skeptical about most quarterbacks and would tell you that most of them don't deserve to be drafted in the first round, but this guy I think is essentially childproof, and the Bears have just progressed from childhood to adolescence in terms of their organizational structure, and figured out after wasting their time, messing around with Justin Fields and really kind of ruining his early developmental opportunity. I don't think they're going to do that with Williams. Great weapons around him. He's going to certainly have moments of hero ball, but they're not massive issues in the way that, say, Mitchell Trubisky had massive issues. So I'm a big fan, and I love to start off a franchise with him as my number 1 overall pick, who I think I'm going to have Aaron Rodgers-like development. I mean, maybe like faster than that, but he's going to develop into an Aaron Rodgers type of player and be a long-term top 5 to top 7 quarterback.
Yeah, people know my feelings on Caleb Williams at this point, and especially the Bears ecosystem and what they've set him up with, which is truly, I mean, terrific. I can't remember like you said, I can't remember very many young quarterbacks getting dropped into a better set of circumstances from an on-field standpoint. Of course, there's the Bears question of it all, and that does, of course, bear watching. So there's all that, right? But I'm curious from your perspective, just because for people who don't know Matt's work, it's some of the most detailed like sickeningly detailed work that you're ever going to find in the industry. And I say that with love as somebody that does a lot of sickeningly detailed work
We're
myself.
fellow sickos.
We are truly fellow sickos, my friend. There's no question about that. But part of what I love about your work is that not only do you go into an incredible level of detail with the current class, you show your work from like a wide historical perspective. And I think that's just like so invaluable for the readers and listeners and watchers if you're just paying attention to an evaluator. So with that in mind, when you look through like RSP history, how good of a prospect is Caleb Williams in your mind? Because you're so right. You are not easy on these quarterbacks.
No, I'm not, because I'm really, I would argue that I'm kind of ahead of the game in terms of the value of processing information. That's something that I've always had embedded with what I do. So a lot of these guys who get drafted who have like the big arm, nice size, went to a big name school and had big box score production, they don't impress me. And they generally are guys that fail out because what goes on between the ears and how fast and confidently they can deliver that information. Execute that information from the moment they spot it is important. So Caleb Williams is really, he had a score of 85, which on my 100-point scale is an instant starter. 85 is that point. Most guys who are like Joe Burrow, for instance, was like, I think an 81, 82, somewhere in that range. And I have a couple of guys that were anomalies. For instance, Skylar Thompson had an 87 score, and I knew it was an anomaly. I literally even listed him number 1 2 years ago and said it's an anomaly. I think he's going to have value, but he's not even likely to get drafted. And so the fact that he played as well as he did was, probably a testament to that. But most of the time, guys like Mitchell Trubisky, guys like that are in like the 76 to 79 range. And a lot of these quarterbacks are in that way. So I would say Caleb Williams over the past 5 years, Patrick Mahomes scored an 87 or an 88. And that was probably one of the best up there. So I would say
one of your like
Williams
all-time best hits is the Patrick Mahomes scouting report.
I probably share my Patrick Mahomes scouting report at least every other week,
As
and I
should.
will probably do that until I die. So I mean, I don't care, because it's that hard to hit on something like that, and that's a career bucket list moment for me. That and probably Lamar and him, but yeah, Caleb is up there with those guys. He may be on the lower end of, where Mahomes was, but that's where I'm at. And I know Will Hewlett, who is the pre-draft coach for Caleb and for Brock Purdy and Anthony Richardson. I contribute scouting reports to them months before I do the RSP. And, I just had Caleb on. I just had Will on talking about Caleb, and he talked about different things with like T-spine rotation and the flexibility of throwing and his ability to process information and how good he was with control in terms of throwing at high velocity and low velocity while still having control of the ball with a high spin rate. So you see a guy with all the tools, and the things that he's up and down about, he has more highs than lows with the conceptual part of the game. And he doesn't tend to repeat mistakes within the same game, where someone like, say, Zach Wilson, he threw a pretty ball at times, but when people really chart accuracy, sometimes they don't really understand what they should be charting. Even if they understand scheme, they could be total brainiacs with X's and O's, but what they should be charting of what's accurate, what's pinpoint accurate, what's not pinpoint accurate. Caleb Williams has all those tools. He's very accurate, and he makes consciously good decisions. And when he makes mistakes, he usually corrects them in game. I mean, it's there. I mean, he's probably one of the top 5 to 7 guys I've studied.
All right, so I'm up here at the 102, and again, this is a Superflex draft, so there's a real temptation for me to go with Jayden Daniels here, because even if I've got questions about him as a prospect and as a player, I'm curious about your opinion of him as a player, of course. Even if I have those questions, like the margin for error for a guy that's going to run in fantasy is just so big, right? Like I can have all these questions about him and he could still be like a successful pick here at 102 just because he's going to run, but that's not the direction I'm going to go. I'm a big Marvin Harrison fan. To me, he's such a clean prospect. I know you have some questions about him reaching his theoretical ceiling because, and you can expand on those here. But overall, I love the player, love how he translates to the NFL as a true X receiver. I think he's got a great set of release moves against press coverage. He's very polished. I do share some of the like questions in contested situations and attacking the ball that you do, that we have discussed privately as well. But at the same time, I think some of those are correctable issues, and he can very well be a very strong player in the NFL. So I'm going to go with him here at 102 because I think it's just a really good opportunity to get a foundational piece for some theoretical dynasty team here, even though it's a Superflex draft.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the safer picks that you're going to make. And even the issues that I would say about Harrison, I mean, the bigger issue that I have right now is that immediately he's going to have to be the man in Arizona. Yeah. He's the split end. He's the guy that's lining up against the top corner. He's the guy that opens his chest up early and gets hammered by cornerbacks occasionally who are actually NFL savvy. It doesn't happen very often where he was at Ohio State, but it did. It'll happen a little bit more often in the NFL. Does that kill his career? Absolutely not. But I could see this being, as a first-year guy who's not also the most quick twitch dude. I mean, like, I'm not saying he's slow. He's not.
Right.
But he's not, he's not Antonio Brown working to get open when Ben Roethlisberger is scrambling around back in the day. He's now working with Kyler Murray, who does a lot of that type of thing, but he's not the quick twitch guy that, say, Malik Neighbors is in that regard to be able to work open. So I could see where Marvin Harrison has like a Larry Fitzgerald rookie year type of scenario, which is still good, but it's like 780 yards, 70 to 80 catches, 780 yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns. Still good enough to be like a wide receiver 3 year one. And then the year after that, Fitzgerald had a 1,400 yard season. So I could totally see that working out. But I could see missed opportunities against top corners who are going to like say, hey, welcome to the NFL. This is how we play. This is not who you played at Michigan that everyone's fawning over. And I think he's going to have some of those moments in those contested catch scenarios. But as a number one as your first overall pick, I wouldn't argue with it. I wouldn't argue with anyone who took him first overall.
Yeah. Tell you what, if he gets between like 700, 800 yards, people are going to be super disappointed. Yes. Just based on where the expectations are right now, the very high expectations. But that's always within the range of outcomes. I agree with you that the biggest question I have with him is just working with a scrambling quarterback like Kyler Murray, because even some like receivers I'd call mid-tier guys in the NFL really take their, like, Gabe Davis is a great example of that. I mean, Gabe Davis is whatever, like he's a whatever starting receiver in the league, but he has made himself a lot of money and has got a lot of cred to his reputation because he has that sense of working with Josh Allen at this point in his career, like 4 years in his career, of like when to snap off these routes. And you mentioned like the quick twitch part of it. So that I think will be the most interesting thing with Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray, because we just haven't seen him do that yet. So I think that will be a fascinating thing to track with this player in particular. But all right, 1.03, Matt Waldman, who are we going with at 1.03?
So we're looking at this as a new team here, right?
Yeah.
So,
total. These are all like within their own little entities.
All right. So then, I'm looking at Malik Neighbors at this point, and I hate for Malik Neighbors that he's a New York Giant right now, because he seems to be hating the idea that he's a New York Giant. But I think
Daniel Jones, all-time great press conference where he just like butchers the starting quarterback's name.
Yeah, because he's hoping to God that Drew Lock has turned a corner.
What a tough way to be. Like, you got to hope for Drew Lock.
I'm telling you, but I think that's probably what's going on, is when you're in your pre-draft visit and you're on camera saying, don't draft me unless you got someone who's going to be able to get me the ball, and now they draft you. I mean, this could be a disaster. I understand. But at the same point, I think at this stage you rely on talent. And when you're looking at overall talent, not just on fit, but just overall what a player can do, I think he's the best player of the skill players in this draft. I think he's the best route runner in terms of the selection and application of release movements with his footwork and his hands. I think he tells the most efficient stories as a route runner with his stems, like the types of stems that you should be using on certain types of routes. He's not playground with how he moves. He's very efficient, and he has really great selection and a great vocabulary of moves that he can use during the stem, during the top of the route, and then he can make all the breaks you want him to make. And he is tough at the catch point and quick twitch after the catch. I mean, I don't know if Antonio Brown is a great comparison for him, but I thought Odell Beckham was a good comparison for him. You know, when you look at the skill set, and he's going to be the man right away. I think he's the most equipped to have to be the man right away. It doesn't mean it's going to translate to four. I think any of these receivers who are the top three, that if you're expecting 1,400 yards and you're trading your entire house to get these guys to say you have them, you've made a mistake, especially in this deep of a draft class. So that's why I kind of mentioned with Marvin Harrison some of the things I did, because I'm I don't trade 3 first-round picks to get him. If people are going to soak you to get this guy. If he lands, if you happen to have the pick to get him, good for you. If you didn't, just build a good team, because you might build enough surplus that you could get Harrison for less 2 to 3 years from now than you are probably going to have to pay for him in a rookie draft. So with Neighbors, it's not as much of a demand for him, but I think the gap between him and Harrison is minimal. And, look, if Darius Slayton can have borderline fantasy level production, I think Malik Neighbors can exceed that pretty easily, even first year.
Well, I think the fun part about Neighbors is that he's equipped to be the man in a very different way than these other two guys are, just because of how he's going to line up, right? His alignment data is very different than Rome Odunze or Marvin Harrison, right? And they're going to be able to hide, you talk about, there's really no way to hide Marvin Harrison, because you're going to, if to use him right and get the best out of him, you're going to have to put him on the boundary, and you're going to have him run out as that X receiver. I think if you did that with Malik Neighbors, that's certifiably crazy. You're not doing that. You're going to be able to hide him as in condensed formations. You're going to be able to put him off the line of scrimmage, give him some of those free releases, and Daniel Jones can mess that up, but he's got to work really hard to mess that up. So yeah, I think that is what, if you're looking for instant impact from Malik Neighbors, that's the story you have to tell yourself. But I do agree with you that overall, and there are some receivers that landed in some interesting spots that we'll talk about here shortly that could produce more in year one than Neighbors or Rome Odunze, just because of the target competition.
Yep, no doubt.
All right, my next pick here is tough. Because I just talked about a lot of the reasons why I don't want to go with Jayden Daniels over Marvin Harrison, and I don't really want to take him over. I really don't want to take him over the receiver I really want to go with here. I don't. But at the same time, I am a coward, and I'm gonna repeat all of the analysis that I basically just said earlier, which is the margin for error with a guy like Jayden Daniels in fantasy, just because he is going to run, it's just wide. Okay, I think I'm not if you had taken Jayden Daniels here, there's no way I'm considering Drake May over the receiver that I really want to take. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way. I'm not so super flex pilled that I'm just gonna go with quarterbacks here no matter what. But I think because Daniels presents an opportunity for rushing upside, and also I do think he maps pretty well to the scheme that I expect him to run in Washington, and I think he fits well stylistically with those receivers that are there in Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. I think Cliff Kingsbury, for all my questions about him, he can design a pretty good run game. So even if I'm not a believer long-term in Jayden Daniels, I am a believer in the immediate impact of him from a pure fantasy perspective. So, hey, if I take him here at 104, maybe I look to trade him at some point. I like Jayden Daniels overall. I don't want to come off like a Jayden Daniels hater, but that's just kind of the way I'm thinking about this. What is your evaluation of Jayden Daniels here as a top 4 rookie dynasty pick?
Yeah, I'm kind of I would say I'm neutral to neutral good on that end for Jayden Daniels, in the standpoint of that he's in that range of scores for the RSP where it's like, I see why he can become a starter and a good one. I also see how they can fail that. Like he could fail that. And the pocket management is okay, could get worse, could get a little bit better, mainly because he's a slower processor than people give him credit for. I've heard some people say he's a fast processor and he makes full field reads, and he does make full field reads occasionally when he wasn't told or when he didn't get in his mind later in the season to become a 1 or 2 read guy and leave. But he also makes what I call tragic comet type of reads where he gets to that second read and he has time for the third and he has space for the third that he's created, and he should know the route and the coverage and say, oh, one more beat and that's there. And instead he turns just as the receiver's breaking open and ends up running, and usually ends up running like Marcus Mariota or Robert Griffin, like in stages of their career that isn't always great. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Lamar Jackson in the pocket. He's not Lamar Jackson processing. He's not Lamar Jackson as a runner. But Robert Griffin at his best, Marcus Mariota exceeding or in his first game, maybe, ever. Maybe he could have that kind of career. I think that there's hope for him there, especially in the offense that he's in with the weapons that he's got. He has a chance to level up fast. So it's an understandable pick for me. But I'm going to say this, Matt Harmon, I'm running up to the podium now.
I know.
I'm running up to the podium and I'm saying, listen, I know because, I'm not broadcasting my thoughts to anybody else usually in any type of draft. I know Michael Penix is going to be there for me. Most likely it's in a lot of leagues at this point, probably second or at the end of the third round, probably the end of the third round in a lot of drafts. In Superflex, probably somewhere in the second round. I'll take my chances. And if I lose out on a quarterback, I don't care because I'm going to build a surplus of studs. And if I don't win right away, that's okay, because if I get a ton of good receivers and backs, I can get the quarterback I want, even mid-career. So I'm getting Rome Odunze. I'm getting the guy who is in the best situation. He's got the best quarterback of this group. He's got a team that's learned their lesson. He's got DJ Moore at the apex of his career right now, who's figured out how to make boundary catches. He's got Keenan Allen, who, when healthy enough, is still playing at peak production. He's going to learn from Allen for a year. He's basically got Aaron Rodgers Jr. in Chicago. He's basically Devontae Adams Jr. in Chicago, and he's going to be in a Devontae Adams situation to learn. So he may not be productive this year on a level of Neighbors and Harrison, but he's going to be super efficient because they're going to get to move him around. Williams is going to defenses have to pick their poison, and he's going to soak up all that greatness that he's got from those two other players and continue working. And if one of those guys gets hurt, he's a 1,000-yard receiver now, and he's not even as good as he could be. So yeah, I don't care. I'll take the mulligan this year and get Rome Odunze.
Yeah, I suck. I definitely should have just taken Rome at my previous pick there for all the reasons you just said. And man, I really went hard back and forth, Waldman, in terms of who I liked more between my number one receiver, Marvin Harrison, and Rome Odunze. I love Rome. I'm so excited about him as a player. I'm glad you said he's in the best situation because he might have he might not have the production that we want this year, but at the same time, there's also a lot of contingent value there if Keenan Allen gets hurt again, right? And what if they just get into camp and who's better this year? Rome Odunze. He might, that is possible, just where Keenan Allen is at this point in his career and the routes you want him running anyways. He's going to be those. Keenan Allen is ideally going to run those layup routes and give the quarterback a reliable target underneath. You're telling me that Caleb Williams is going to be reading that before he's going to be reading the Rome Odunze routes? I don't think so, pal. No. And I think he's going to be on the field, Rome Odunze, 80+% of the routes. I'd be, or at least 70%. I'd be stunned. He's not Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I know both you and I liked last year, but JSN's a slot guy. Rome Odunze is not. This is not a similar situation. So, yeah, great freaking pick, pal. I regret it already. And now, because especially now, I'm looking at the board and this is not fun here. At the 6th pick, because I I'm not that excited about the Bowers landing spot. I think it's a little early for my receiver 4 or 5. So like, I guess I just gotta, I guess I just gotta close my nose and like take one of these quarterbacks here between Drake May and JJ McCarthy. And you could really tell I'm super convicted on this and I feel great about it. I think I'll go ahead and take Drake May. I know you're not super high on May, so I'm curious what you think about this, but I do at least really believe in New England's commitment to develop him the right way. The fact that the first thing they say after they draft him is like, we could start Jacoby Brissett this year. And like, look, teams say that all the time and they never do it. So that's possible. But I really do like the player's ceiling. I like the projectable ceiling you see out of him. I do have questions about how consistently he's going to do it from a year one perspective. And most importantly here, Waldman, I like what they've done at the receiver position in the draft this year. I like Polk. I like Baker as second and fourth round picks. So I could easily have really screwed myself here and just really struck out. So if you were in my position here, would you have taken May, McCarthy, or somebody else?
I would have considered McCarthy, but I probably would have taken somebody else, and I probably would have said, forget it with the quarterbacks. I mean, I know that they look at Drake May, and they see he looks like someone out of central casting for what an NFL team wants from a quarterback. He also, so did all the other quarterbacks I mentioned that haven't worked out, like Daniel Jones and, and Drew Lock and Mitchell Trubisky and Zach Wilson and, the line, it goes down the line. The thing with Drake May is he's a slow processor. He drifts in and out of the pocket too much. His accuracy does not work well for me from a charting standpoint. And it's rooted in that the speed and accuracy of what he's reading and getting it out confidently just isn't there too often. He's tough. And he's going to need to be tough if he ends up playing in New England early. I hope for his sake, for his development, because you root for these guys. I hope that Jacoby Brissett gets to play a full year, because this Elliott Wolf thinks he's enacting the Green Bay Packers plan. But I would argue that Jordan Love had 3 years to get the bandwidth small enough so that when he's on the field, he's not worrying about being in a new town, having a lot of money, being famous, learning the playbook, learning the complexity of defenses, addressing all sorts of fundamental things about his throwing and his movement as a player, and acclimating to the speed of the game, because he got that intermittent level of starts while playing behind Aaron Rodgers. And then when he got to be the starter, all that stuff was in place. He didn't have to overthink. His game wasn't slow on the field. When he had bumps in his game, he was able to correct them pretty quickly because he wasn't questioning everything. And he had young receivers who had 1 to 2 years of experience or no experience at that point, but he already had 3 years on them. Drake May, if he gets put in right now, it's him and rookie receivers in New England. Kids. Yeah, a lot of kids. That's, to me, they're all but getting put in the frying pan. So it's like, it could work, but I'm looking at Drake May, and I feel like he's the most likely to be the next Trubisky scenario, because he's going to get rushed. And I just don't believe New England when they say it. I want proof before we go there.
That's a fair point. And the biggest thing that holds me back from like thinking they can pull this Jacoby Brissett thing off is just like ownership wants to see the new quarterback. And like, that happens all the time across the league. And like, we know New England is not the most patient. They can say they're patient, whatever. They're not a patient environment because of the success they've had there. But all right. So I hate myself for what just happened in the last 3 picks there. Take someone here 7th off the board, Waldman, and try to give me a break on this one.
Man, but you're my friend. I love you, but this is draft time, so I'm going with Ladd McConkey right here. I mean, listen, he's sitting there, and you expect me. I went to the University of Georgia. I used to cover those guys back in the day. I lived there for 20 years in Athens, and I'm not going to take Ladd McConkey. I mean, come on. I got to do that on behalf of my peoples. So listen, Greg Roman's going to be running that offense, right? We saw what he did in with Baltimore. They like to throw to the middle of the field. Keenan Allen's gone. Josh Herbert is really good at throwing in the middle of the field and being able to work with slot receivers. I think Ladd McConkey is going to play that slot flanker role. You're going to see, he's going to get free releases off the line of scrimmage. And with that footwork, he's really good at that. He's a little less proven with using his hands, but he's not going to have to do that as much. He's going to get a lot of those types of alignments that you just described with Malik Neighbors. He's probably going to be the volume leader because Quentin Johnston kind of has that Josh Norris like profile photo on Twitter where he's imitating Ricky Bobby and doesn't know what to do with his hands when the ball arrives. And that's been an issue. And he's year 2. Now he's not a first round draft pick. He's a year 2 guy who can't hold on to the football with Jim Harbaugh coming onto the field. And they've got Brendan Rice, who may clap attack a little bit, but he's still a much better player than what his draft status would likely lead you to believe because this receiver class is so rich. And, Josh Palmer, fine, last year of his contract, he's not going to drop a lot of balls, I don't think. So he can be helpful to an extent, but the production leader is going to be Ladd McConkey in this offense. And it's going to be built on efficiency. They're going to use a lot of RPOs. They're going to use a lot of screen stuff. And he's great at running, setting up blocks. He's got great footwork and really has a good feel for hugging blocks and setting up space. And then he's a great double move guy too. And, Justin Herbert off play action is deadly. So McConkey's to me, like I debated early on, is Ladd McConkey not maybe one of the top 3 guys based on landing spot at the receiver position? He might be, if someone took him number 1 overall, I would say it's ballsy, but I don't have an argument for you.
I mean, he could easily lead rookies in receiving yards this year. Easily. Yeah. Just based on the landing spot for those top 3 guys, especially Neighbors and Adunze, and just like what he got dropped into for McConkey here. So yeah, I love this pick. I'm not going to go quarterback at this next one. I'm going to go with Brian Thomas Jr. here out of LSU. There seems to be some trepidation about, are there too many mouths to feed in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense? Like Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and Gabe Davis now, and now they add Brian Thomas. Like, is he too samey with what you want to use Gabe Davis to do? Well, I would counter with this. They've been feeding those mouths for the last few years, Kirk and Ingram at a very high volume, especially Ingram. And like, how's that going for you, Jacksonville? How's that going for you feeding those mouths? Like maybe it's time to get somebody else a bigger plate here. And I think that's why they take Brian Thomas. I think he offers something that none of the receivers do on this roster, which is like a true ability to separate at all 3 levels, to win against press coverage. I loved the way his release moves grew as the season went on. Like I thought you saw on the job development with Brian Thomas. His ability against press is the thing that really made him a first-round receiver in my rankings, and that's just not something they've had in Jacksonville. Even Calvin Ridley, like that's what he struggled with last year. So love the pick of Brian Thomas for Jacksonville, and I think he will. Like I think again, it's good that he has other guys there, that he doesn't have to be the man right away, because I think that would have been problematic for him. But at the end of the day, I think he's clearly the most dangerous receiver in Jacksonville, and I could see us like, even if it's a slow burn for him, I can see us coming off the season and being like, oh yeah, he's ready to soar in 25 and beyond.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm in the same spot with you. I think it's a really good pick. Brandon Angelo and I were talking about it last night on our podcast, and he mentioned Thomas as probably fearing that he might be a slow burn to start, but I'm okay with that in dynasty leagues. I mean, really, 3 years from now is a very different window than what we're talking about today. And I think that you don't take a guy this early, and with his skills, he's very good after the catch as well. He's going to become a complete route runner. I think he's on his way to doing that already. And everything that you said, I'm totally on board with. And that kind of gives me like pause now when I'm going to draft, because like I love watching AFC West football. And there's a couple of AFC West guys I'm really kind of torn between. And I feel like whoever I leave on the field, whoever I leave here, I'm going to kind of regret that I'm not going to get a chance at them. but I think I'm going to roll with Xavier Worthy.
Ooh, okay.
And this is not normally the guy I would pick. There's another guy, the other guy in the AFC West, I probably would have taken ahead of him. But I go back and forth on these guys. I'm a Worthy fan. I believe he's more of a Deshaun Jackson type of player than a Jameson Williams type of player. Or more of maybe an Isaac Bruce for some of the old heads like me who remember, having him on our fantasy teams. Xavier Worthy I think he runs good routes inside. I think he makes strong plays in the middle of the field against tight coverage. He gets ping-ponged off defenders. He's physical. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go out there and seek it out and be crazy about it at his size, but he understands how to deal in that realm. And he fights the ball a little bit. You watch him and there's a little bit of, but then you go and watch his best work and you watch a lot. You just look at the volume of really strong work that's out there. And he makes very tough catches in a technically sound way. So in this offense with Rashee Rice's legal issues, Sky Moore basically, probably in the hit the road jack phase of his career. People get logo scouting worried. They look at what happened with Moore. They look at Kadarius Toney. Like you need a drink with Moore. I probably need a drink with Toney. Mecole Hardman, I never even understood why people were saying Tyreek Hill Part 2. But I think Xavier Worthy is legit. And I'm okay with taking shots with who's going to be the guy for Patrick Mahomes to finally be the guy who figures it out, to be learn all three positions quick enough, be able to make all the adjustments that need to be made and grow and continue to grow with a mid-career all-timer. And I think Worthy is a good contender for that throne. Some of those other guys I didn't draft nearly as high, but I'll take my shot here with Worthy.
Yeah, Worthy lines up in terms of my receiver board. This is where I have him, wide receiver 6 among the rookies from a post-draft perspective. Now, pre-draft, he wasn't this high for me because I do have questions about his ability to play against press. I'd have questions in terms of playing in contested situations, but I'm with you that from a route running standpoint, he's much further along than some of these typical speed based busts, right? His success rate versus man in zone is pretty solid, where you'd kind of want to me, I thought he was a priority second round player, but he goes to Kansas City here. I think he will be, my prediction is that he ends up being a better real life player for Kansas City than a fantasy player. Just because he's going to open up so much for these other guys. He's gonna have big moments, but I think it will sort of come in spurts. But here at this point in your rookie draft, you're just trying to get a usable player, and I think Xavier Worthy will be a usable player. This is just the thing about why, and I know you do a great job of this with the RSP, is post draft versus pre draft analysis. For me, Xavier Worthy, if he had gone to 25 teams in the league, I would have been I don't know about that. But he goes to this one, and I feel pretty good about how he's going to be deployed in this offense. So that brings me here to the 10th pick. You talk about the other AFC West guy. It's Brock Bowers time for me. So look, I get it. Questions about this offense in terms of just there's actually kind of a lot of guys here in this offense, right? We know they want to run the ball a ton. Devontae Adams is still a guy that's going to command 140 plus targets in a season off the bus. I love Jacoby Myers, one of the most underrated receivers in the league. Michael Mayer's not a bad player. Michael Mayer's pretty good. And we're asking Gardner Minshew to elevate all these guys along with Brock Bowers, Aiden O'Connell. That I don't love, but that's year one. Okay. I think the Raiders, with all those cast of characters I just talked about and a culture that seems super appealing for with what Antonio Pierce is building there, are they not going to be the most attractive destination for a veteran quarterback or a rookie quarterback trade up at some point next year? Dak Prescott in a Raiders jersey, start the Photoshops, bro, because people are going to be saying that all year long. So in that case, Bowers maybe not set up to produce in year one, but you hopefully are not relying on him at this point. Oh, there you go. Waldman is showing me the Raiders hat here. Let's put the hat on Brock Bowers here for Harmon's fake dynasty team.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, that's the guy who I was thinking I kind of have pangs of regret that I left him on the board, but it's one of those scenarios that, I just looked at it as, are they going to find the quarterback? And that's and that may have been at least today. In 5 minutes, I'm going to leave this conversation and go, I'm going back to having Brock Bowers 6th on my board, but,
Yeah.
but it's one of those deals where, for a time, sometimes I think about it and go, well, listen, I was a huge Steve McNair fan and a Titans fan for a while until they got rid of him unceremoniously. And, they have not found a quarterback since. If you really look at it, since MVP Steve McNair back in the mid 2000 aughts, they have Marcus Mariota, who had one great game to start his career against Tampa Bay. They've had Ryan Tannehill, who they didn't draft, who was serviceable. Will Levis and Malik Neighbors are the other two guys.
Malik Willis, but and then Vince
Malik
Young
Willis,
before that.
Yeah, and Vince Young, who was nice for a year, but not who they wanted to pick. The owner basically countermanded everybody who wanted they wanted Jay Cutler, which probably would have worked out okay if Josh McDaniels didn't stink up the mess year 2 in Denver. They had a Pro Bowl player until he came in and did what he did, which was basically a phone call telling him he was awful and didn't even say hello. I was told this by Ted Sundquist, the GM at the time, who was in the room, and he turned and looked at everyone, turned and looked at his agent and said, "Can you trade me? Just trade me now."
Yeah. For real.
I mean, So anyway, I look at Bowers and he's someone that he reaccelerates past cornerbacks who are on the same side of the field as him. That's to me, he reminds me of two players. One is every analytics, fan, analyst dream of a player who may not always had been great in the stat column, Vernon Davis. He's got a little bit of Vernon Davis to his game. And then the guy that nobody likes to bring up, but we're compartmentalizing this to football, Aaron Hernandez. He has the skills to be a do-it-all player like Hernandez. And he has some of that high-end speed and ability to win the ball like Vernon Davis.
Yeah, I love both that range of comps there with those two guys. And again, Raiders get a quarterback and we're flying here with Brock Bowers. I realize that's just not on the table right now, but overall I feel like that's good. Couple things here. We've got 2 more picks in the first round. I'm an idiot for even thinking there was a chance where we were going to do 3 rounds. There's no way we're going to do that. So
I bet we can if we go fast.
Well, we're not going to go fast. Let's just see how the second round goes, pal. So we might have to go faster the second round. But all right, you're up here with the 11th pick in the first round. Who are we going with?
I'm okay. 11th pick in the first round. I'm just going to go ahead and take the chance, and I'm going to go with Keon Coleman.
Okay.
And I know that this is I like Keon Coleman, and I'm unapologetic about it. I've heard your great analysis about him in the sense that, he's not much of a separator according to the metrics and the studies that you've done with him. And I looked at him and I felt like he could go either way. I thought he was one of those players that if he lands with a certain quarterback who doesn't have anticipation, who doesn't throw the ball into tight windows in that level, that he's going to be that second read guy who's never open to that player. Like if he was with Kyler Murray, who cannot move in the pocket without dropping his head and running and doing fire drill type of antics, then he would be bad there. But with Josh Allen, who can actually move efficiently in the pocket, but also break and buy time, Keon Coleman's better at being able to find openings and create on the move. He did it with Jordan Travis pretty much all the time. He's also going to be used a little more in the middle of the field. And if he's used outside, which Billy Bean did mention that we're going to use him for a bit outside, I thought he did a good job of, at least from a film standpoint, purely of getting that step or half a step on a player. Now that may not qualify as open in a lot of things that we look at, but when I'm projecting for the best in the league, getting that step to half a step is fine as long as you have that quarterback who has the courage to throw the ball. And I'm watching Josh Allen have the courage to throw those balls to Khalil Shakir as a rookie, and Shakir make those plays. I think Keon Coleman, to me, as a ball catcher, if we had a contest where we had to have our lives saved basically by somebody putting a brick wall up and saying you can go through it, around it, under it, however, you've just got to catch this ball to save this person's life. Now, we're all probably going to be dead, but if there's a guy I would pick out of this entire class to win and figure out a way, it would be Keon Coleman out of everyone, because of all the ways he does and he's a smart player who I see the route skills and the way that he can be efficient. And I think that at worst case scenario, he is what everyone who wasn't probably fantasy analysts thought Gabriel Davis was going to turn into. I think he already is that.
Yeah.
I think he can be more. I think he can be a Michael Thomas type player in this offense. And I think if they use him outside, there's a little more Anquan Bolden to him, like early career Anquan Bolden to him, than maybe meets the eye. And I'm not going to deny with a good quarterback that that's going to work out. We just got to root for your Curtis Samuel to stay on it. And if he can stay on it, we're going to be okay.
I mean, I love Curtis Samuel. Okay, so here's the funny thing, and I was really looking forward to the Keon Coleman conversation, so I'm glad you've just gone ahead and done it here in the first round. And this is why there's no way we're making it to round 3, pal. Idiot for even suggesting it. But so here's the thing with Keon Coleman. I actually agree with a lot of what you just said there. Now, I think a lot of this is type of wide receiver. For me, I don't want this guy that we're going to have to give the Anquan. All right, he could be Anquan Bolden to be my top outside receiver. That's just not for me. But also to your point, that's not for me on 30 NFL teams, either Mahomes or Josh Allen. I think it can work, right? I think that's the thing is you see Coleman go to Buffalo, you're like, all right, well, if somebody's going to make it work from a receiver that I do think will struggle to be a above average separator in the NFL. I think even if he hones everything correctly, I think he could be in that Mike Williams range as a separator. Which, we've seen Mike Williams be a productive player in the NFL. I think Williams gets undersold as a separator. I think he gives you enough, right? It's enough to be a top outside receiver, especially if you have a volume sponge in the slot. So but I think that's where I'm at from a ceiling perspective with Keon Coleman. I will say, though, I'm with you that, again, I've said this all draft season. People are going to see the route chart and see some of the red and just be like, he sucks. He definitely doesn't suck. And I've said that consistently when talking about Coleman. He works the middle of the field well. You look at his dig route success rate is really good. Or it's average. It's solid. 73.1% is pretty good. Again, solid average score. It's not spectacular, but it's fine. He's got good hands. I'm with you. He doesn't drop passes. That's going to be appealing for the Bills after living through the Gabriel Davis experience. That's going to be critical. I'm with you that he works off script well, which is a must for Josh Allen. If you're not going to work, if you're going to work off script, you cannot play in this Bills offense. I bet that was an appealing thing for Buffalo. And I think he's underrated after the catch. I really think that's why I want him to play in this big slot receiver role.
He was a punt returner in college, and a good
punt returner.
I joke he's the LeGarrette Blount of wide receivers, which will turn off a lot of casuals about that. But he's the guy you draft. You're going to be perennially drafting when everyone tells you that he's bad, and he's going to outscore all the guys that they drafted that they took ahead of him. And he's that type of guy, And so, yeah.
I just again, do I think he is in? He's just a difficult evaluation because, like you mentioned, with reception perception, history is not on his side. There's no question that the guys that separated his level versus man press, unless they move inside, they don't become high quality productive players in the league.
Your process is great because it gives people an understanding of who the potential outliers are, because it doesn't love certain players. And what I mean by that is that every process, when you have difficult players that you look at and you go, I see where they're good, but history isn't on their side. Those are guys that you want to monitor and keep a close eye on. They're harder to pick, but they're the ones that if you pick well, they're the outliers who win for you. But it's tough. If you gave me, I joke all the time, if you gave me 20 Terry McLaurins, pre-draft to study, I'm not rating them high 20 times right now, because to me, he's the bumblebee of wide receivers. Literally, it's impossible that this guy should be able to fly the way he catches the ball.
Yeah, it's a great point.
But so was Marvin Harrison Sr. So maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. learned all this stuff from Marvin Harrison Sr. and he's going to be fine, but he drops more than Sr. did. So, but that's the point, is that like your process, if someone wants to be good at picking wide receivers in fantasy football, yours is the process that they need to look at right away. And then as they continue to get deeper into the league and what they do, they ask the whys and look into the nuance of things that you're asking the whys about. And you go, okay, well, here's the guys maybe I should take a chance on, even if the product isn't good.
And the thing with Coleman too is, like, Brandon Beane says he's going to play X receiver. Okay, for now, right? Because those are the guys that are playing that. Like, you're not playing. I love Curtis Samuel, and I think he can play outside. You're not playing him at X receiver. I love Khalil Shakir, but you're not playing him at X. Okay, so. Coleman, from a size perspective, has the skills to do it. He's going to block well in the run game. He's got the reliable hands. And like I said, teams want their X receivers to be working the middle of the field. And Coleman diagnoses zone coverage really well. Like, again, 80.2% success rate versus zone and reception perception is not bad. It's not a bad mark. There are clear negatives on his profile. There are also clear positives on his profile. And I think it depends on what you value. So like when I have readers or people in my Discord ask like, why is Waldman so much higher on Keon Coleman than you? I think you value certain traits. I value certain traits, and like, again, I think this landing spot is good for Coleman. And like, let's talk in 2 to 3 years. Like, maybe they say, hey, shoot, this is not working out from an outside receiver perspective. Let's kick him inside. And then that's kind of how I think his career is going to go. I think he probably is like an 80 target player, maybe 90 target player in his first year. And then the more they build up that receiver core, because these guys are temporary players right now. Like, I love Samuel, I love Shakir, but they're like role players. So whoever the next Buffalo receiver is maybe helps Coleman a little bit. So I think that was a good conversation. I'm glad you picked him here so that we can have that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just add a little postscript and just say that, when you look at this guy, the same thing that people ask me the same thing with you. And, I would say, listen, I see where the downside is,
right,
for sure. And I'm projecting pre-draft, what I'm looking for is where can it work and where does it work?
Correct.
And I could see that scenario and go, he's still going to be high because there's areas for where it works. He just happened to land in a spot where there's some possibilities there. And the way they use the X there, I would bet he's also going to be the guy that drifts behind the third level a lot on Josh Allen, because they're going to play a lot of zone, because Josh Allen wears out man-to-man defenders with the amount of time he buys. So we'll see.
Last note on this. It's funny because like our notes on the player are not very different. I think you definitely ranked Coleman higher from a pre-draft perspective than I did, because again, just valuing different traits. I'm going to be labeled as a Keon Coleman hater because of the route charts. And I love my route charts, but it's just like, this is why I also hate them at the same time. So, all right. On that note, I'll be real quick here with the 12th pick in the first round. And I'm going to be super boring. And you know what? Actually, I'm not going to be super boring. I should probably just take JJ McCarthy here because he's a quarterback. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take Jonathan Brooks here at the 12th overall pick in this first round, because I'm sick of being boring and taking quarterbacks. What did I take, 2 in the first round? I'm not going to do it again. Brooks, I think, I'm curious about your opinion. I'm a really good player in my mind. I think he's a solid back. And he's just in a position where he's going to get a lot of work in Carolina. I really believe Dave Canales is a good coordinator. I believe he wants to run the ball really well. So I was thinking I was going to take JJ McCarthy there. McCarthy's fallen a little bit in our draft here, but I'm going to go with Jonathan Brooks because I don't want to be boring.
I love Jonathan Brooks, my favorite running back in this class. Hoping that David Tepper can stay out of the way, or maybe they could just put him at quarterback for about 6 minutes, and then we won't ever have the problem again. That's kind of my vote, is that maybe if he wants to call plays and write him on a napkin, maybe we just put him under center for about 6 snaps. I think that's all it will take, and he'll have his hat removed at that point, and maybe he will let the professionals do what they do. But Brooks, Brooks for me is the guy that smartest running back in this class, I think, or one of the 2 smartest running backs in terms of scheme versatility. breaks a lot of tackles, knows how to punish people, whether you're LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles in size, or whether you're a bigger back like Brooks. The fact that you attack first allows you to dictate the chain of events where you get yards. And he knows how to do that. Best pass protector of this class, too.
Yeah,
easily.
Good call.
So, the injury concerns me. Is he going to be Tony Pollard ready? Which means we're going to get on the field and he's going to be dragging his way back to health until like late in the season and not feel good, but tell everybody he feels great until the stats weren't there? Or is he going to, or can they wait a little bit longer? Or is he going to be young enough and return to form? But love his game. Think the Carolina Panthers have improved a little bit up front. If they can take the next step, which, we're leery about, he could get more opportunities, more red zone opportunities than we would project right now. But to grow with, why not? He's got really high upside.
All right, so we are officially in round 2, and we are going to have to pick up the pace here for sure, so we can get through this thing and get you out of here, buddy. But all right, so you have the first pick in the second round. Who are you going with?
All right, so I hate that I'm gonna do it because I'm not a big quarterback. I like the quarterbacks in this class and their potential, but Superflex, I feel like I'm going to have to take one. I'll take J.J. McCarthy here. It's a great fit with Minnesota, with the weapons that they have. He's a good quick game thrower, great feet, someone who I think has a lot of things to correct. I would say this. I had a quarterback coach ask me, is he Zach Wilson 2.0? And I said, if you're going to say iteration 2.0 in terms of he has more highs than lows, whereas Zach Wilson only had lows, in my opinion, as a decision maker, especially in red zone, black zone, those types of things, reading leverage. McCarthy has a lot of highs. And I think the lows are things he can address and get more mature with. You do wonder about his downfield accuracy. I didn't see a lot of that, and I don't need to see a lot of it to chart it well. But I didn't even see enough for my own process to feel great about it. But I think it will probably translate. I think the pro day or whatever they saw in workouts was probably good enough for them to feel comfortable with it and with that surrounding talent. Maybe he turns into a Jake Plummer-esque type of player who has highs and lows, but at worst. But I think that he's someone that I'll go for here, even though maybe they wish they had another player themselves, even though they didn't get, that trade didn't work out.
All right, so my first pick in the second round here, I was a little concerned you might take this guy from me, but I'm going with Ricky Pearsall here near the top of the second round. This is how my receiver board lines up. I'm a big Ricky Pearsall fan. I had him as my wide receiver. I was like stunned by how pissed people were with this draft pick just based on my own rankings. And like, I shouldn't be because I realize I'm not like everybody else. But I had him as my wide receiver 6 in the class. I had him as a fringe first, early second round rank, right where he went. I'm so confused that we're 49ers fans are like pissed about this pick when you lost the Super Bowl because your other receivers besides Ayuk can't beat man coverage, and Ricky Pearsall is a man beater, baby. Number 2 in the class in reception perception and success rate versus man coverage. So this lines up with my board here. And like, honestly, Waldman, I think if Debo was traded, tomorrow, he would jump all the way to wide receiver 4 for me because it's the right system for him. Love the landing spot. Maybe that's too aggressive for some people, but I'm a big Pearsall fan. And like, you look at some consensus ADP lists, it's outrageous, like truly outrageous how low he is. Maybe that hasn't been recalibrated prior to the draft, but like, I see some guys ahead of him from a receiver perspective I wouldn't even come close to considering before Ricky Pearsall.
I love Ricky Pearsall too. Now I have him a little bit lower, but at the same time, it's only because are they going to trade the guys that are going to be traded? And if they don't, they play a lot of 22 personnel, a lot of fullback tight end. Maybe he won't be on the field as often, but I'd have to think that maybe somebody else gets taken off the field as good as Ricky Pearsall can be against man coverage. The only issue is how much do they want to play a rookie and how up to speed will he get? If he gets up to speed quickly, it may not be a big problem year 1, but by year 2, either Samuel or Ayuk are going to be traded, if not both, and he's going to wind up having to be the man.
Yeah.
And like you said, great man coverage guy. he would win the Brandon Lloyd catch invitation on the Matt Waldman RSP Island if I drop out. He would definitely be one of the top early odds favorites. For me, probably moving forward on this next pick, I'm probably gonna I'm hating it either way, because I'm either I have 3 players that I'm considering. 2 of them are running backs, and both are going to have to wait a little bit. And then there's a player that's probably going to have to wait a couple years as well. But at this point, I'm just going to use the show that me and Bob Harris do on Mondays called Feel It or F It. So I'm just going to say F it, and I'm taking Michael Penix Jr.
Yes.
Even though he's probably going to be gone. We could probably take him in round 3. If this weren't, if we weren't setting us up the way we did, I would probably be able to take him late round 2. But here at this point, I'm going to look at the other quarterbacks in this class, and here's how I'm laying out this argument. I'm going to try and make this as quick as I possibly can, but I'm going to say it this way. First of all, there is a huge demand for quarterbacks next year, rookie quarterbacks next year, probably up to a dozen teams. The supply is always low. Okay. And it already looks projectedly lower than what it was this year. 4 teams tried to trade up to get Michael Penix this year. Okay. I know that Kirk Cousins complained. Okay.
Shock.
Shock. Yeah. Same guy who was drafted in the same draft after Robert Griffin, and who wasn't ready until he was 27 after looking pretty bad, awful at times, because that's what happens with young quarterbacks sometimes. And he was not as talented as Michael Penix Jr. is. Penix is good in the middle of the field. He's better in the pocket than people realize. He really understands how to climb a pocket, which a lot of these guys in this class don't do as well. He's more accurate than I think people have charted. I've charted him, and I saw a lot better accuracy where he threw the ball only where receivers need to make the plays. And listen, it's better to pick a quarterback when you have a quarterback, because you don't have to put them under pressure. He's in the true Jordan Love development plan, and I know that Kirk Cousins wanted another piece to help his team. But look at the Atlanta Falcons, who have a good offensive line, strong run game with 2 deep with their backs, a Pro Bowl caliber outside receiver, Pro Bowl caliber tight end. And last year they had some up and coming pieces on defense, and they should have been a playoff team in that division if they just had a quarterback and they didn't have to jerry rig a system to even make their quarterback semi-passable, and that wasn't even working. So what do they need more? Another defensive tackle? Or do they need a quarterback who, if Kirk Cousins, who in the same breath said he was disappointed and they needed an extra piece to contend now, said, I can't break a pocket right now. He's going to be 36 and he can't break a pocket right now. Maybe he'll get better. They put over $100 million on there. And yes, I know they needed to explain to Arthur Smith what was going on, but maybe Arthur Smith shouldn't have picked Kirk Cousins in the first place to give $100 million guaranteed to. And maybe the coaches in this case and GM might be a little smarter than Arthur Blank in this particular scenario, as brilliant of a businessman as he was. And they get a player who could help them right now if they need it. And if not, well, guess what? He gets the intermittent playing time that helps most players like, Drew Brees and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes and Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love and Steve Young, and the list goes on, guys who got to sit at least a little bit. He's going to get some of that. And by year 3, he'll be fine. If they wait 4 years, they're not going to. He'll be 28.
Yeah, no
Cousins was 27. Brees was 27. Steve Young was 31, for crying out loud. So for me, I look at this and go, you guys can all tell me that this was a dumb pick for Atlanta, and that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and make off like a bandit and get Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, like the crux of the Penix pick is your evaluation on Penix, and like Waldman has a very different view of him than most people out there. Certainly myself, like I've got questions about Penix, but like you're a much better quarterback evaluator than I am, pal. So people should subscribe and make sure they get the RSP simply for the Penix analysis at this point, because it is a contrary view than what you're going to get elsewhere.
And I miss on players. We all miss on players, but I will say, listen, I didn't like Zach Wilson. I didn't like, Kenny Pickett. I didn't like, some guys that people were really high on. And we just talked about Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So if I'm contrary on a quarterback, it may not work out, but I like this guy. I think he's the second safest quarterback in this class.
All right, for my pick here, fourth pick in the second round, I will go with Trey Benson. I really like the way Trey Benson sets up. Talked about it a lot on the show post-draft. Maybe he doesn't start the season because James Conner is going to be there, obviously, but he's a really good complement to James Conner, and I think they're going to find ways to get him on the field. And I would not be shocked by the end of the season, whether by injury or just whatever, he's the starting back for this team. And I think it's an offense on the rise.
I love it. A good gap runner, good pass catcher at times. I think he just has to correct some things. He bounces outside a little too often, but he's in a good system for him to really develop into a solid game-breaking, high-volume threat, or at least a lead back. I'm going to go running back again, and while I hate that Sean McVay is stubborn about his system, and I hate that he doesn't like rookies, and that I heard a running back on his team last year, I was told that he said that, Zach Evans was the man, and none of them understood why he wasn't getting playing time, and I'm a Zach Evans stan. I'm taking Blake Corum because he reminds me the most of Ray Rice back in the day, a guy who, if he can add a little weight and stay explosive, can be a lead back. He and Jonathan Brooks are the two smartest runners in terms of decision making. Very quick, creative with his footwork, but efficient tackle breaker for his size, and I think can give you an all-around game. And they took him that early either because the GM and McVay aren't on the same page, or they are on the same page. And at this stage, I'm going to take the chance. And I think Kyron Williams is now like the Chester Taylor, the guy who had 1,500 total yards before Adrian Peterson came in. And while Corum is no Adrian Peterson, he is the guy that's going to take over, and they may split time this year and be better next year.
All right, for my next pick here, I'm tempted to go off my board, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stick at receiver, and I'm going to stick at my board, and I'm going with Jermaine Burton here, who is volatile at this ranking, volatile where I'm taking him, but this might be...
You got me back.
This might be Joe Burrow's number 2 receiver, in a year from now. I also think he's going to get on the field in year 1. I think he's prepared to get on the field. I think he's a pretty pro-ready prospect. I look, big Jermaine Burton fan overall. I know you are too. Burton's a guy that I like. Again, I know this is aggressive, but I was pretty aggressive, ranked right in the same spot. Jayden Reed last year, and Reed worked out because he was just ready to play in this system. And I think Burton's ready to play in this one.
Yeah, I love that pick. He's probably my favorite talent of the players that we've talked about who are underrated. Mm-hmm. The most underrated receiver probably in this class for fantasy purposes. And if T. Higgins wants to go somewhere else, he may not do what T. Higgins does best as well as what T. Higgins does best, but he does more than what T. Higgins does. And he can actually carry what Jamar Chase does as a replacement to Jamar Chase better than anybody they have in that. He can be a number 1 if they need him to be. It's not ideal, but he can play all 3 roles. And he's a guy that actually opens up that offense more and what Zach Taylor likes to do. And he's going to get behind the option. So I really like him there. I'm going to go, oh, wow. The choices here at this point, there's a lot of guys that are fascinating, but I think that at this stage, just because we'll get a chance to talk about them, I'm just going to take a chance. I'm going to be that team that takes Bo Nix right here.
Oh, boy.
And yeah, and people are going to laugh, but there's probably other players I would consider, honestly, like Jalen Wright. Let's go Jalen Wright. Let's do Jalen Wright.
Okay.
Well, I'll just be smart about it. Let's say Jalen Wright. All right. I compared Jalen Wright to Raheem Mostert pre-draft, and guess who saw him as a Raheem Mostert type of player. He hugs blocks well on the gap plays, which is very important, which is something Mostert was great at. He's got that game-breaking speed. He's a pretty good receiver. He can give you that space option and space too, but he works well between the tackles when he's mature enough with certain decisions, but he bounces outside too much at times. He's going to get a chance with Mostert getting 1 more year. And he and Achane are probably going to be the 2 guys that it's going to be the 1-2 punch. Achane is just going to stay in the same role he is because they're concerned about his size.
Yeah. I like this pick. I love the fit with Jalen right there. Well, not a lot of teams you could have gone to, but this one makes sense. Eighth pick here. I'm kind of running up the card for AD Mitchell at this point. I think I was slightly higher on Mitchell than you were pre-draft, but
Right.
and this landing spot is a little bit like I can go either way on it because I think he's talented enough to be the two at least on this team behind Michael Pittman. Just because he's at his position, X receiver, he's not going to leave the field. Whereas Josh Downs, I love Josh Downs, but just his position as a slot, he's going to leave the field at times. But you could also tell me that like he's a distant third, but between like him and Pittman and Downs, like I think that's possible. And I like Anthony Richardson, but we're not confident in terms. I mean, I'm confident in him from what I saw, but like we can't be like he's not a known asset right at this point. We don't know exactly. So I go either way on the landing spot. But ultimately, I love the like alignment based fit for AD Mitchell, and I overall like the talent. Not totally sold, but I do like his ability to run routes and get separation and win at the catch point. So I will go with I'll go AD Mitchell here with a pretty solid bit of conviction.
Yeah, let me put it to you this way. I had Anthony Richardson with a slightly higher grade than Caleb Williams, so I love Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're big on Richardson.
So I think that AD Mitchell has a chance to not only be a high variance producer, but also maybe cut that variance down a little bit and be an efficient one on top of that. I'm going to go ahead and take Bo Nix just so that we can talk about him, get out of the way here, and say that I do have him kind of a little underrated because he was my third quarterback on this board. And the reason is that everybody looks at the central casting guys and they pick them early for the upside, but the upside is actually what happens here, not what's going on here. And Bo Nix has enough in the athletic spectrum to be a good quarterback and work off structure. He fits very well in Sean Payton's offense because it's quick timing routes, quick hitting work. And I actually thought that he was probably one of the most self-aware quarterbacks of this group who didn't engage in hero ball and played with a lot of logic. Auburn did not do him any favors. Auburn created scenarios where he couldn't trust his receivers to hang on to footballs. He also tried to play a lot of hero ball. That got fixed a little bit more. He was in Oregon, and at Oregon, he was better moving around in the pocket. Very good pocket mover. I don't love the receivers in Denver right now, and that's the biggest issue. But if I'm going to take a chance on a quarterback and say it's a startup draft, I would say, well, in the second round, if that's my first quarterback, I'll go for it.
Yeah, I think the system fits really good. It's just the overall ecosystem with Bo Nix and like, yeah, what is the upside with Bo Nix? But in fantasy, like you're just looking for usable quarterback play in Superflex, like from your second or third guy. And I can see a scenario where he gives you usable quarterback play. Okay.
We can go a little longer if you want to.
Okay, well,
we can go another 10 if you want.
Here's the thing, man. This is actually we've got a few more picks here to make. I don't love like any of the running backs left. There's no quarterbacks left. So I'm probably just going to go receiver here to end this, and I will go. These two guys are very close in my rankings. The two receivers I'm debating right now. I think I'm going to go. I'll chicken out and go against my number rankings, but I will take the player that's in the same tier that's behind the guy I really want to take here. I'll just go with Xavier Legette because he's first round pick. This is very deep in the second round for a rookie draft here for a first round pick to be going off the board. I actually don't really have a strong take on how this one goes because I think he's a very volatile prospect. He shows you some real good ability to win with his hands. He shows you an ability to diagnose zone coverage pretty well. But he's not a refined route runner, period. Like, end of story, especially against man press coverage. He is much worse off than Keon Coleman from a route running perspective. No question. Even if they score out similarly, they don't really score out similarly. Legette's a little lower. But regardless, I do like the way Dave Canales has talked about using him. I think he's definitely a long-term project. Yeah, Hugo doesn't like the pick.
Hugo's not a fan of wide receivers. He's a box safety.
At least Legette has the size to take a big hit from a box safety like that. But yeah, so there's another guy I really wanted to take here, but I'm a coward. I didn't do it, and I've been a coward all draft, so I'll go with Xavier here.
Hey, listen, to me, Xavier Legette, he's a developmental prospect in an early round draft capital, because he's a guy that is a timing route runner, as a man-to-man route runner, needs to learn how to drop his weight into breaks. And he doesn't do that. But when you watch him as a runner, he can do it. So it's kind of like if you were scouting that rugby player, Louis Zammit, like you might be looking and go, well, these are things that could translate with a lot of work, And I think that with Leggett, you see flashes of where he could apply that elsewhere, but there's no guarantee that he's going to learn that. So I'm a little worried about him on that level. If I'm going to, there's two backs I'm looking at here at this stage, and probably the only one that I'm looking at probably long term who might be able to help me out, because they're, Josh Jacobs has an out next year in his contract. So what that tells me is that Marshawn Lloyd, while he was in that amorphous mass of running backs after the third running back on my board, who was really low in the pre-draft because he fumbles a lot and he bounces a lot of plays outside, he still had a high enough grade that really, if he fixed any one of those things, he could be the number 2 or number 3 back on my board. So that's why you have pre-draft analysis and post-draft analysis. A.J. Dillon, look, if he can't beat out A.J. Dillon this year, that means that he does have some issues that need to work on. Yeah, we're in trouble. I like A.J. Dillon as a grinder, type of back, but he hasn't shown enough to really be anything from a fantasy perspective. Josh Jacobs is one of the excellent backs in the league. So if they give Marshawn Lloyd a little bit more of an Aaron Jones type of role early and he thrives, he's the man next year, because they probably have an out with Jacobs, or it could happen. So I'll take that shot, even though it's, there's a little bit of risk in it. And there's actually a back I like a lot better, but I think I can get him in the third round. And that would be Kamani Vidal if we had time.
Oh, yeah, that's a great call. Just tell me a little bit about Vidal. I'm not taking him here in my next pick. I'm going to take another receiver, of course. But because he's a guy that people are going to be really interested in because of the landing spot.
Josh Jacobs, or J.K. Dobbins, who I absolutely love coming out, is basically a desperation rental by Jim Harbaugh, who they got a week before the draft, recovering from an Achilles. And I hope that he pans out, but odds are against him.
Yeah, not great.
Vidal, if you were a DeAndre Swift fan, but didn't know much about him, but just heard a lot of people talking about how great he is because he's so productive, those people were looking into the future and were imagining Kamani Vidal as a player. As a talent, Vidal is built low to the ground. He can break a lot of tackles. He's a smarter runner between the tackles than Swift, who needs a lot of space and a lot of simulation of space to really get his yards. But Vidal also can catch checkdowns, and he's a better blocker than Swift is. He can work inside and really take on blockers well. And to me, he projects more as a lead back in ability. And he's on an offense where J.K. Dobbins, again, we don't know. Gus Edwards is 29 and has a role, and he's more of a desperation lead back if they needed him to be. And Isaiah Spiller I don't think he's figured out that his hips need to be aligned with his pads when he takes on defenders. He's kind of got a little bit of a Braylon Allen problem there, where he tries to bounce outside people when he takes them on rather than trying to run through them. And he has some maturity issues as a decision maker. So Vidal has a really good opportunity to grow into a contributing role this year, and maybe even due to injury, be the Isaiah Pacheco of this class.
I love that call. Again, I wanted people to hear your analysis on him because he's going to be a big time riser in the post-draft process. All right, for my final pick here, this is the guy again, according to my rankings, I would have taken ahead of Xavier Legette, but I'm an idiot. So I'm going to go with Jalen Polk here, Waldman.
There you go.
Man, I don't know about you, but I was confused at the backlash that this pick got. I guess just because it wasn't commonly mock drafted, right? Like, it wasn't commonly drafted that Polk was going to be drafted super high, but I'm a fan of him as a player, man. I think he's reliable. I think he does the dirty work well. I like his build-up speed against man coverage, and I think for me, he was one of the top zone beaters in the class. So look, it's obviously a questionable situation going to New England. We don't know, if Drake May is going to pan out, whatever. But if he does, stylistically, what helped Drake May a lot in 2022 was having a reliable separator in the middle of the field. Polk is not Josh Downs in terms of how he can beat man and press coverage off the line of scrimmage, but I think there are ways you can use him over the middle that will map pretty well for Drake May. So I like Jaylen Polk. I think I was in support of that pick, so I'll take him here as our final pick in this exercise.
Yeah, absolutely a quality player. I mean, that works out well. That's why my dog's barking. It's that, or he sees a Steelers wide receiver in my backyard right now. I don't know which one is which, but I'll probably go and find out soon. But Polk, good. I mean, one of the things that we often hear about guys who can go up and win contested balls, and we like them about them so much, sometimes plays to their detriment in the pros because they don't know how to really earn ideal position. You know, if you remember Colin Johnson from Texas, who's been like 3 different teams, he was one of those guys that opened his body to defenders as he made these unbelievable athletic catches. But Polk is a guy who understands how to position his body to win the ball and block out the defender.
That's what I love about him.
And he's good after the catch. So, yeah, he's a fine player. Certainly understand it, like the pick. Hope they don't put them all in the frying pan at the same time and turn the heat up too hard.
That would be great. I think the guy of all these rookies in New England, I think the guy who's most ready to make an instant impact is Jaylen Polk. So hopefully he can get some play with Jacoby Brissett at some point this season. All right, Waldman, that was electric. I should have known better than to think we were even going to get close to sniffing a third round. I'm not sure what was dumber, thinking that we were going to get a third round in or passing up Roma Dunze for Drake May early on in this class. I think actually the dumber decision was the Roma Dunze pass on my part, but I appreciate you doing this, buddy. This was awesome. Love catching up with you. We got to do a deeper dive on some of these guys at some point. But for now, tell the people where they can find your work.
Yeah, the rookie scouting portfolio is 19 years in publication. It's available every April 1st, and you get a pre-draft and post-draft available at $21.95 for both. Usually the reaction is I'm blown away by how much I get, and I've heard the hype on it before. The second reaction is usually I'm a customer for life, and the third reaction is the next year, which is you should really charge a lot more for this. It is one of the 2 most purchased draft guides by NFL people who come to college, facilities and scout players. According to folks like Alex Brown, who is a recruiter at Ole Miss and former recruiting head at SMU. I contribute scouting reports to, quarterback Will Hewlett, coach Will Hewlett, and it's been a fantasy staple forever. You can find it at mattwaldman.com, YouTube channel. I have over 800 videos. I put my podcast up there, Matt Waldman's RSPcast, at Matt Waldman's where you can follow me. And if you want pure fantasy stuff, hey, listen. I've been writing about fantasy since 2003. I'm senior staff writer at footballguys.com. Excellent site.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly endorse, obviously, subscribe to my site, sure. But, there are a couple other places I definitely would recommend you spend your money, and Matt Waldman's RSP is one of those. I have been buying it for a ton of years myself now, and I would endorse everybody to do that as well. All right, for today, that is going to do it. I've got a dog barking here in the background, so we are on the same page on many things, Matt Waldman. That is going to do it for today's show. Next Tuesday, we're back, and Scott Pianowski joins me for a post-draft fantasy football power rankings show. Until then, we're out.